Good evening and happy Shabbat. Welcome to Yada Yahweh Radio. I know, Kirk, you're here because we've talked prior to the show. I don't know if JB is with us as of yet or not, but welcome to everyone who is listening on their phones and who is in the chat room for our Shabbat program. Kirk, what we were talking about before the show began is that the material that we have been covering, at least I've been covering in my writing, because we have, for the most part, been focused on presenting the two chapters on Moab. And we'd gotten all the way up to Lot finally getting out of Sodom and the consequence of him heading towards Zoar, which means lowly and little, and then hiding out in a cave with his daughters. And that's where we were. And we can go back to that for this evening. But the thing that was, which we were talking about during the show, is that you've begun reading the material that's in the first chapter of the third volume of Observations for a Time. And it begins with the first Mizmor. It goes to the first chapter, I think, is first, second, and third Mizmor. The second chapter is the fourth and fifth Mizmor. And I ended up calling that first chapter, volume 3, on the first three Mizmor, the second coming. Because it's as obvious as the nose on our faces that there is a second coming, and it's of doubt. That's who Yah was coming back with. There's absolutely no question about it.
No question.
And in the Mizmor 4 and 5, there are some terms used that just rocked my world. I mean, they profound, and took us just all over into finding corroborative statements. And the way that Yahweh is going to use Dode when he comes back, the very fact that Dode is the Messiah. He's the beloved Son of God. He is the branch. He was, is, and forever will be the King of Israel. Everything that is projected by Christians on Yahusha pertains to and is undeniable about Dode. And God explains why it is, and I had to go through the whole thought process of why it would be inappropriate for God, based upon his nature, to bring attention to himself, particularly diminished manifestation of himself, who came to fulfill Pesach, and therefore was destroyed after Pesach. His spirit left him, and the body of the Passover lamb was sacrificed. It was destroyed that evening. And why God wouldn't want to bring attention to that moment of his life. Very painful. And, God's not going to, Yahusha can't be the King of Israel.
No.
Yahweh can't bring Yahusha back with him. He's promised to do that with Dode. And his name that said emphatically that Dode is the King of Israel. And that he's the shepherd that's going to tend the sheep. And it goes over and over again telling us how sad it is that the world has missed this, how important Dode is, and how they missed it. So it's hard knowing what we're headed towards in terms of material, not just jumping in with both feet, which is what we talked about today. It's the affirmations that began to grow through the second volume of Observations for Our Time was just this marvelous realization, particularly for Yehudim, for God's chosen people, for Israel. It's everything they could have ever wanted.
On a platter, man.
Oh, served up on a silver platter, gleaming. It's they recognized that Yahusha could not be the Messiah that was foretold, because the prophecies about him require a number of things, not the least of which is that he be a Gabor. A Gabor is a warrior.
Yes.
It's a strong, valiant man who fights in battles to protect his people and for what's right. Yosha most certainly was not a Gabor, and they knew it. And so the reason that Akiba convinced Yehudim to accept Bar Kokhba as their Mashiach is they were so focused on what Yosha didn't have as to why he couldn't be the Mashiach that in the next Yobel year they found a guy that embodied the very thing that he lacked. Now, of course, Bar Kokhba missed everything else, but he had one thing. He was a fighter.
Yeah,
he was a warlord.
He was a warrior.
Yeah, he was a warrior.
Yeah. They
knew it. They've always known it. What they haven't figured out is that the individual's Dode, and that's because for Rabbinic Judaism, Dode is as much a poison pill as he is for Christianity. To know who Dode was, how he lived, what he said, how Yahweh referred to him, completely annuls and destroys every tiny, minuscule aspect of Pauline Christianity.
Oh, yeah.
Dode is the antidote for Paul.
Total.
But he is also the antidote for Rabbinical Judaism. Rabbinical Judaism says, you need the Talmud to explain the Torah. And you can't observe the Torah without the Talmud.
Oh, yeah?
And that rabbis have to explain it to you because no just normal guy that's untrained can read and understand what God has to say.
Well, I'm about as normal as it gets.
Dode is the guy who proves, I'm sorry, but that isn't even remotely true.
Yeah.
So nobody, he's been discounted. In fact, I had to look up some things. I was just trying to find some references. And you read what the people who write about David, they don't know his name is Dode, have to say, and they all dress it up in the Star of David, and they just completely miss the entire point of his life. So, for Jews, the dead God on a stick that they knew was not the Messiah, that they've been accused of killing, even though it was Rome that did that deed, and therefore the Roman Catholic Church, that all of the horrible conspiracies have derived from, that they're never going to be asked to accept him. What a relief. To not be Jewish, and you and I are not Jewish, we don't know the pain and suffering Jews have endured since childhood over this, and how Christians and Catholics alike have demeaned them and been prejudiced against them, and how they have accused them relative to this false notion of killing their God. They don't have to do that. All they need to do is listen to the voice of the most important Yehudim in all of history, probably, in fact, arguably the most important man in all of history. Amazing. What could be better?
Yeah.
The man God chose to be king is the man God chose to be king. The man God anointed as his Mashiach is Messiah.
Let me throw something out real quick. I don't want to interrupt your thought, so tell me no if not. Just a second. I'm looking at Mashiach, and I hadn't connected this dot to just now. I'm looking at Mashiach in the letters, and the letters are cleansing, purifying words that lift up and protect. Now think about that. Yosha has no letters, no words available to us to do any of those things. He cannot be the Mashiach.
No. And beyond that, first of all, Yosha really condemned his people. And rightfully so. And so does Dode to a large degree. But Dode, while speaking speaking of those who opposed him. For the most part, his people he defended, and he fought against his people's enemies. But with Yosha, he really spoke harshly about most everyone, and of course, he never lifted a sword. In fact, he said, that wasn't what he came for. He came to be the Passover lamb. It's with Yosha, he came to fulfill the purpose of Passover, and Dode explained the purpose of Passover. Dode never quotes Yosha, but Yosha quotes Dode.
That's a great line.
Even Yahweh quoted Dode.
I know, that's even better.
that statement that Christian pastors read out of context after quoting something from Paul, and it says, the flower fades, the grass withers, but the word of our God endures forever. It's a quotation from one of Dode's Mizmor. Yahweh inspired Yahshua to write it into his prophecy pertaining to Dode 300 years after Dode wrote it. And no one wants to bother to figure it out, so that if you say what's in that prophecy, you figured out that when Yahuchanan the immerser was standing there in the Jordan and saying, I am the voice of one calling out in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, according to the King James Bible, that whole prophecy is about Dode. Yahuchanan just flat out missed it. The prophecy is about Dode. It quotes Dode. It specifically names Dode. And there's scores of them. The second chapter of Volume 3, just for fun, after the Psalms, particularly the 5th Psalm, made it obvious that Dode is the Mashiach, the Melech king, the Shemach branch, the beloved Ben son, that I was compelled to go and say, all right, let's go and nail this thing down. And I found, I think I quoted a score of different places where Yahweh reaffirms all of this, saying it bluntly, so bluntly. It's amazing that there can be Christian Bible scholars, and they not say it. But if you read any Christian Bible scholars, like the prophecies in Zechariah that they say about Yosha being the shepherd and returning for his flock. Do you know that the prophecy in Zechariah, like all the others, specifically named Dode?
No.
And then what they'll say is, but you see, but Dode is just a synonym for Jesus.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I can't stand reading their commentaries. I just don't do it.
It's just amazing.
Yeah. Well, if you're gonna lie, man, you just.
It is powerful stuff. It has it reinforces that what we came to realize, and I think we only really came to fully appreciate this. We came to fully appreciate, or certainly appreciate Dode, back in the time that we first translated Mizmor 19, the 19th Psalm. It talks about the saving nature and the goodness and the perfection of the Torah. And then we really came to embrace him as the one we should observe and act based upon his 119th Mizmor, which devoted 8 sentences to each of the 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, presenting them in alphabetical order. That was pretty extraordinary. And then we came to appreciate him all the more when we read. My dog just screamed. I don't know what she did that was so hurtful, but she scared herself to death nonetheless. When we read Yahweh saying, he is my son, I am his father. I realize he didn't say that about anybody else. He is quoted, perhaps, of saying it, this is my son, but never saying, this is my son and I am his father. And then what we did is we spent an entire chapter on Shemach, branch. And all the references to Dode vis-a-vis the branch. A whole chapter on it. And so we got a little closer.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, we began to look about how important he was. And then the cathartic moment for us was Yeshaya 9. For unto us a child is born on our behalf, a son is given. And the attributes, that's when we went through, and the attributes there, more of them apply to Dode than apply to Yosha. Some apply to Yosha, some apply to Dode. The preponderance of them, though, however, apply to Dode. And we began to realize that there really is something extraordinary going on here, and that the world has missed it. And that was really the place where I think I ran afoul of a lot of covenant members with it. Just were not willing to place Dode in a position that's anywhere close to approaching the importance of Yosha.
Well, Yahweh does.
Yeah, Yahweh goes beyond that.
Yeah, he thinks he's great. Man.
How many prophecies is Yosha named in?
Don't know.
The answer is none.
I was searching, so yeah.
There isn't a single prophecy where Yosha is named in. Do you know what name appears in prophetic testimony more than every other name combined?
I'm sure it's Dode.
It's Dode.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really not tough to figure out. And when Yahweh is speaking about Dode in prophetic testimony, he's not speaking of Dode as, hey, he was really a cool dude. I really like the way that he was a shepherd king. That was great stuff. Wouldn't it be nice to have Israel reunited as it was under Dode? Because Dode was a swell guy. I just loved his passion. Yeah, can you imagine that Dode got Goliath with a slingshot? Doesn't say any of that stuff. What it says is, when I come back, I'm coming back with Dode. What it says is, when I return, the king of Israel is Dode. What it says is that Yahweh has appointed Dode to be over every Gentile. What it says is, Dode is my shepherd, and I have commissioned him to be shepherd over my entire flock forever. What it says is, Dode is my Messiah. He's the Mashiach. I anointed him Messiah. That's what it says.
Wow.
It's not hidden. It doesn't take any interpretation. Now, Kirk, you began as we before we started the show, and then we're going to go back to where we were in our story of Moab. You began by saying that as you read through the first two Mizmor, the thing that you've come to recognize is that if you're a Jew, you're a Yehudim, you're a Yisraelite, God is giving you everything you could possibly have dreamed for on a platter. It's all there.
Yep.
It's Dode. Your guy. Your language. Your book. Your God. Your country.
What a gift.
What a gift. It's his words on that neck, that sign. There's even in the 18th Mizmor another mention, in fact, two in the 18th Mizmor of this Nakri, this foreign individual. And I had a reason, that was what we covered last week. I just shared the beginning of it, which is what Solomon had to say at the dedication of Yahweh's temple in Jerusalem, right around 968 BCE. And turns out, Dode wrote about it, 18th Mizmor. And he will say that finally there came a bunch of time that a foreigner, and this foreigner, this Nakri, is actually based on Nakar. Nakar means someone who is observant and comes to understand. Someone who's paid attention, has been discerning in a different place and time. And he says, so finally, this observant foreigner listened to what I had to say, and then all of a sudden, the descendants, those who were part of the group that benefited from what he found, have it figured out. It's everywhere. So we're in for quite a treat, and particularly if you are Yisrael, if you're Yehudim, if you're Jewish, this message is for you. It's from the heart of Yisrael to the heart of Israelites. And the thing that's really interesting, though, and I just want to say this one thing before we pass on. When the Nakri was first introduced by Solomon, well, it wasn't actually first introduced by Solomon because Dode wrote about it in the 18th Mizmor. But both in the 18th Mizmor, Dode is talking about prophetically what's going to happen with this observant foreigner. In that same context, he says that Goyim are going to listen to him, and that Goyim are going to act and engage with him, and that God put him over all of the Gentiles as a result of this. And in the Solomon statement, it says specifically that the whole world's going to come to know, it's Yada, what Dode wrote because of this observant Nakri, simultaneously, such that, and it says specifically, so that the Goy and Yisrael hear at the same time. So while this is for Yisrael, it's inclusive of Goy in both places.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
So all very, 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 very cool.
Boy, really exciting stuff.
It really is. It's particularly for those of us who have, Kirk, you're Goy. I'm a Goy. Mm-hmm. For those of us who knew that the only reason we're doing this, the only reason we have this job, is because Yehudim didn't do it. Yahweh was looking for a Yehudim to do it. A Yehud couldn't find one. And he knew that, which is why he predicted that he's going to communicate through the likes of us to his people. But when you've it was 19 years ago that we embraced this mission for me, and not that much longer thereafter for you.
Okay.
That we embraced this mission. We've always known this was the mission.
Oh, yeah.
That while we were delighted that other Goyim would benefit, we were doing this on behalf of Yahweh for Yahweh's people. And it wasn't that because you and I just love Jews, Because I'm going to tell you, Israel's a screwed up place. You know, their government, they don't even have a constitution, and their letter of agreement gives essentially half the power to rabbis. You know, religious Jews are no better and maybe worse than religious Christians and Muslims.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not that we're infatuated with what Israel represents today, or what they would, and most certainly we're opposed to Judaism. It's that very early on you learn that they are the chosen people. God loves them. And God's going to restore, well, he's really frustrated with them. He's going to restore his relationship with them. And nothing means more to God than restoring his relationship with his people.
Mm-hmm. All through
yeah, it's all through everything. And one of the things that I think just becomes natural to any of us who come to know Yahweh, respect Yahweh, understand Yahweh, is that we are highly motivated to engage in such a way that what we do is what he wants. I mean, you could do a lot worse than pleasing the creator of the universe. And there's an enormous benefit and reward and sense of satisfaction of doing something God wants us to do. Well, he wants to reach out to his people. He wants to restore his relationship with them. He wants them to have the information they need to know who he is, understand what he is asking and offering. And so when we study that and share that, we're not only learning and benefiting ourselves, and therefore also aiding and abetting Goyim, but our every moment we spend studying, translating, and sharing is in perfect harmony with Yah's will. That's reward in itself, and that's a huge part of what we do and why we do it. And that's been the case from the very beginning. And so to read these kinds of affirmations, extremely gratifying.
I guess. It's so exciting to me. I just go, wow.
Yeah.
I'm out of wows. Well, I guess I'm not.
You and me both.
Yeah.
Load.
Flip side.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, unfortunately, we're about going to the flip side here because we go to Lot and.
Yeah, but you need to understand the flip side. The thing about Dode is that he's like Yahowah, and that even more than half of what he has to say, he spends it exposing and condemning those who are in opposition.
Yeah, regardless of who they are.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of people that just say, well, why are you so fascinated by this David fellow? I mean, he was always belly aching and wanted, vengeance against his enemy. What's the deal? What's your fascination with the guy that's just so fixated on punishing his enemies?
Yeah.
Well, it's no different than Yahowah. And there's a reason that Yahowah and Dode are focused on retribution. And that is that even for those whose souls are simply going to dissipate, they deserve to know that those who mislead them are going to be held accountable. Even if we're older and we're eventually obviously going to die, if someone takes the life of our son or daughter,
get them.
Yeah, we're never going to have closure until we know and hold the person who did it accountable. Right? And that's what Yahowah and Dode are saying. Yeah, I'm going to go after him. I want him judged. I want him punished. They need to be held accountable. What they did was awful. And the people they harmed need closure. They need a sense that there is justice. In fact, there's one psalm that specifically says it exactly that way. So Lot ascended out of Sor, trivial and immature, lowly and little. and settled in the higher elevation along with his 2 daughters, because he was afraid to live in Zoar among the lowly and little. And he crouched down, staying in this cave, this hole in the hill, along with his 2 daughters. Man, if you know where Sodom is and where Zoar was, by the way, Zoar, first Sodom. Sodom is in the plain of the Jordan. The Jordan ends in the Dead Sea. Sodom is on the east side, as is Zoar, as was Gomorrah. In fact, all of the cities of the plain are on the east side of the Jordan. They're all within 10 miles of where the Jordan flows into the Dead Sea. They had to be because they needed the fresh water. The Dead Sea was salt water, and the Jordan is fresh water. Mm-hmm. And so it was the well-watered plain that they were on. Perfect place. And most of the cities were right there above the floodplain. So, you know, the Jordan would flood, particularly near its mouth. And so you didn't want to be right next to it. But they were just up as the hills would then rise above the plain. And Sodom was due east. I mean, exactly due east of Jerusalem. And Zoar was slightly southeast of Sodom. So rather than going due west when the Malach encouraged him up Moriah, which he could see clearly rising above him to the west, he went southeast. And you know what the closest significant geographic site is from Zoar?
Well, I'm looking at a map that's oriented in the east, so it's the southeast, so we'd have to be going that way in the east. You'd have to go towards Ammon or Moab.
Southeast. It was Moab. That was Moab before Moab, because Moab hadn't been born yet. Moab is about ready to be born, but it was in Moab. Yeah. What's the most famous place from the Torah's perspective in Moab? Where did the voice of the Torah die?
Mount Nebo.
That's it. Kissing cousin to Mount Nebo.
Mm-hmm.
That was delicious.
It is.
So that's where the lowly and little was, and he left because he was afraid to be there, and he crouched down, staying in this cave along with his 2 daughters. You know, one thing just leads to another. That which was acceptable and considered correct in Sodom breeds misdirected and fractured families with stunted growth, leading to Zoar remaining immature as a result of trivializing Yahweh's message, as did the one who named himself Paulos, lowly and little, the father of the Christian religion.
Love that.
Yep. Further, the girls who grew up in Sodom gave birth to Moab, the modern incarnation of man, and to Ben-Ami, the offspring of our nation. And Lot, believing himself free and enlightened, was anything but from God's perspective, because he returned to the darkness of that horrific night in Sodom. These things are all interconnected. If Lot understood why he was removed from Sodom, if he understood why Sodom was pummeled, do you think he would have chosen to live in a cave?
Well, absolutely not.
No.
He had a brain, I mean, if he could understand it, but he didn't have any understanding.
And he had an uncle.
Yeah.
His uncle was more than willing to explain it to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uncle Abe, right up the hill.
Yeah.
Maybe he was so embarrassed. I don't know.
Well,
Then the firstborn daughter. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's reminiscent of when Moshe brought him into the land, and they were afraid all of a sudden. They've seen him do everything, and he's seen, Lot has seen Yahweh, or these two Malak wipe out the town and save him. What is he afraid of?
That's right.
He just doesn't want it. Now, I looked at his name. I don't want to take too long, but I looked at his name with a lamb, wah, and a thet, and that would indicate that his name actually means to be led to increase towards the mark. So he's operating. So his name is good. So he has to be. I figured the most he can be doing is he's using free will to choose the dark cave over Mount Moriah. I mean, he is absolutely, he didn't want to be covered by light. He wanted to be covered by darkness. That was a desire of his, not to be. Based on fear, maybe it's motivated by fear, but that doesn't make any sense. He just doesn't want it. But most of the world doesn't want it. Otherwise,
correct.
It'd be the most popular.
Yeah, he was afraid, and I think that's really a profound thought. Lot was afraid to embrace the truth because he knew that by embracing the truth, he'd have to reject everything that everybody else believed.
Well,
he would have made himself a complete outcast from the world as he knew. And this idea that I'm going to accept as true that which my uncle and I have now come to know, and reject everything that everybody else believes is true, was too scary. He couldn't do it. A lot of people just won't take that step. Most people won't take that step.
No, vast majority won't take it after they know it. After they've read enough, believe what you're writing, and after they've looked it up or they've discussed it, thought about it, carefully considered, and then they walk away like it didn't mean nothing.
Yeah. So when we start valuing our own opinions and believe that we're entitled to them, we distance ourselves from what Yahweh intended for us. A covenant family, by comparison, is guided by perfect parents, by our Heavenly Father and spiritual mother. As a result, the children of the covenant are lovingly led and intelligently instructed. Such is not the case with the family of man. Then the firstborn daughter said to the younger sibling, by the way, the daughters and the wife are never named.
I noticed that too. I was looking for them.
Yeah, their child is named, but the wife and the daughters are never named.
Product. Yeah, the product is.
What you need to know about them is where they came from. Then the firstborn daughter said to the younger sibling, our father is old, and there is not a man in the region to come near us, much less upon us, as is the way everywhere on earth. To come is bo, to arrive and enter.
Yeah.
Near us as much, or upon us, is al-ananu, over us, as is the way, consistent with the manner everywhere on earth. Well, there was no hint of it in Sodom. Now, in the cave above Sor, the conversation had turned to sex. The daughters who were not in accord with the ways of the Sodomites were aware of what was required to conceive a child and were eager to experience it, albeit immorally and inappropriately with their father. Since we enjoy affirming some of the insights we have garnered along the way, many years ago, when we discussed the creation and flood accounts, we came to realize that the content determined whether Eretz should be translated literally as the material realm or broadly as the earth, narrowly as a region, area, or territory, or specifically as the land of Israel. Now, in this situation, the initial use of Eretz requires a very narrow perspective, while the second must be rendered very broadly. So I'll share that again. The firstborn daughter said to the younger sibling, our father is old, and there is not a man, Baha Eretz, in the region, within this location or area, to come near us, much less upon us, as is the way everywhere on Kol Ha-Eretz, on the earth. And the reason that was just important is it's nice to see affirmation that context determines how you render Eretz. You know, like the whole earth was flooded or this region was flooded.
Region, right.
Right. Linguistics aside, it's obvious that Lot took the girls out of Sodom, but he couldn't take Sodom out of his girls.
Well phrased.
I experienced this. Go ahead, Kirk.
No, I was just going to say that's well phrased.
Yeah.
Like you're right.
I experienced this with my eldest son, who was misled by a charming anthropology professor while earning a minor to pair with his major in mechanical engineering. He would leave the university, but the misguided notions he picked up there would forever influence his perspective and judgment. Today, as I was augmenting this chapter, it actually occurred at the time I was working on it. A friend shared some citations her daughter had quoted in a paper on criminal psychology. It was horrifying to read how far scholars will go to indoctrinate their students, such that they accept the most ignorant and irrational deceptions of political correctness and multiculturalism. The cited scholars, and this is important because it is what is being taught to young people today, and because this is how they're being indoctrinated, what we're witnessing is Moab. Multicultural, socialist, secular humanism and its moral code, political correctness. And they enforce and instill this moral code with greater passion and with greater subjugation, labeling those who don't comply heretics, as did the Roman Catholic Church.
Can't get you a degree, can't get you a job. It's
no.
very powerful.
Can't get a job, can't get a degree. The cited scholars went so far as to say, albeit using obfuscating terminology such as restorative justice. Imagine that, restorative justice. That means forget about what's right. We need to restore things the way that we think is right. So we're going to call it restorative justice. And criminogenetics. Criminogenetics. That it was improper to devise or implement any plan to reduce crime such that it targeted those statistically the most likely to commit those offenses, since the evidence, they acknowledged, was in conflict with their notions of societal engineering. They laid it all out. They just used really strange terms to say that it was wholly improper, unacceptable to devise or implement any plan to reduce crime if it targeted those statistically most likely to commit the crimes, because the evidence was in conflict, the truth, the facts were in conflict to the society they were trying to engineer. So they were opposed to criminogenetics. Like your genetics are prone to being a criminal. They were, which actually is hypocritical because they're admitting what they're trying to obfuscate. And restorative justice. They even acknowledged they wanted to sanitize minorities and censure the ability of the majority to express ideas contrary to their own.
Man, that sounds like the Catholic Church. I read that about 5 times.
And this young woman trying to get a grade in this class had to present these scholars as being the guides as to how to create the model society.
Yeah, a great priest.
Right. Take the initiative and follow through, she said. You should choose to behave, moving through life, going ahead, choosing to have our father drink, desiring our dad to consume wine. And then we will fulfill our desire to lie down with him. Shakabim here. We can choose to lie and sleep next to him, with the result being that we'll have sex with him. and create and perpetuate new life through our Father, such that we live on through our offspring. Wachaya min ab ananu zera. With life continued, sustained, and maintained by way of our Father through our descendants, choosing to restore life from our Father through us. Barishit, 1932. They had it all figured out, didn't they?
They had a plan. Not a good plan,
right.
But they had a plan.
Let's take the initiative. We're going to have sex with Dad, so let's take the initiative. Let's choose to get him drunk. By the way, do you think they could have gotten dear old Dad drunk if dear old Dad wasn't already a bit of an alcoholic?
Yeah, you know what? You're going to like this. One of the same letters that make up the word lot in the same order. It means laudanum. So I looked it up. I said, okay, aromatic gum resin from trees, bitter, pungent taste. And then they said sometimes it could be, maybe it's myrrh. So I said, okay. So I Googled it. It's an alcoholic solution containing morphine prepared from an opium used as a narcotic painkiller. It's an opioid. That's his name.
It's an opioid. Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
He's a drunk, man.
He is.
He's an alcoholic.
And there's a reason that he was hooked on drugs and alcohol. And by the way, there were drugs back then. Yeah, there was a reason that he was hooked on drugs and alcohol. And that is, he couldn't live with himself.
Yeah.
He couldn't cope with life. He had to numb himself because he couldn't deal with reality. So it didn't take anything for these girls to get Dad drunk.
No, he enjoyed.
He was a lush.
His wine, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, be careful here because without beer and wine, man doesn't survive.
I know.
Man doesn't survive. There is no culture. There's no cities. There's no communities. Man doesn't survive without beer and wine because water is deadly, particularly water around other people. It'll kill you. Well, not some of the time, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so without the alcohol killing the bacteria, you can't live. And wine is one of the symbols that Yahweh uses all the time. So wine is a very positive thing, consumed correctly and recognizing what it represents. And there is a drug that Yahweh actually endorses. Was used. It's spoken of very highly. In fact, Yahweh actually encourages its use. I know this will melt your brain cells when it was first brought to my attention. I said, no way. Way?
What is
it? Marijuana.
Oh.
Hemp. Hashish.
Everybody in Colorado just had a Yahoo.
Hashish. Yeah. Yeah, because hashish doesn't produce hallucinations. It doesn't impair the person and their judgment the way that alcohol does.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates a pleasant sense of euphoria, a sense of gregariousness with others. One's inhibitions are a bit reduced, I guess. Of course, you have the munchies. So I don't know if they had potato chips back then.
A lot, apparently.
You have the munchies. But it's hashish. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's specifically named on two occasions. It is specifically named as hashish. So again, in the right place, in the right amount. God is not a cosmic killjoy. He's not against us drinking wine. He's not against us drinking beer. He's not against us eating and partying and singing and dancing, and in the right amount at the right occasion. Not opposed to hashish. So there you go. But abuse of it. Different story, and clearly Lot was an abuser.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, we can't blame this on Lot, at least not entirely. His daughters chose inebriation as the path to fulfill their ill-conceived idea of engaging in incest and pedophilia, and most likely rape. Their intoxicant of choice was wine, a beverage fermented by the same ingredient removed from the bread their father had prepared and offered during matzah. So, the fact is that they choose to inebriate him. You know, one of the things that is just in the last 5 to 10 years, something that society has accepted. And you know, if you're a single guy, you ought to pay attention to this. Do you know that a woman cannot legally give consent for any sexual contact if she is intoxicated?
Yeah, I heard that.
So all those guys that, you know, let's take her to the bar and get her drunk and she'll be more pliable, well, you're committing a crime. Because it's impossible for a woman, according to the law now, to give consent. They don't actually turn around to the guy, but they probably should. But you can't give consent if you're intoxicated. Well, that's basically what Yahweh was going to say. He's going to say that Lot did not give consent. In fact, he was unaware of what was happening to him. So long before, this would have been, 4,000 years before man came to this point of view. God is saying that if you're drunk, you can't give consent. If you want to give consent, you need to be of a clear mind.
He can't be that drunk that he's got to perform. It's not easy to perform if you're 3 sheets to the wind. So he had to have some awareness. But I hear you.
Yeah, I'm going to read what the words say.
I know.
I think it is fascinating that God's going to say that he did not give consent.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until about 10 years ago that jurisprudence in the West reached the point to say that a woman cannot give consent if intoxicated. Same example that's being said here.
Okay.
Just a point of interest.
Yeah.
Their justification is one of the principal reasons this story is being told. Sodom and Gomorrah were not a once-and-done phenomenon. That which occurred there would infect the human experience many times over in Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Greece, Imperial Rome, Roman Catholicism, Islam, and in Nazi Germany, to name those most hostile to the chosen people, leading up to the present day, where Sodom exemplifies conspiratorial and religious, politically correct, and multicultural man. Yes, Sodom would live on as a result of these two women's desire to engage in sexual relations with their father. The sickness infecting Lot's daughter would plague the world. It would come to be known as Moab and Ben-Ami, those of a questionable father who are the children of my country. They didn't tie their father down and force him to drink, so at the very least he was willing to drown his sorrows. But, as is the case today, an intoxicated person, as I mentioned, cannot provide consent, which is the test of rape. So they caused their father to drink wine. They offered and encouraged their father to consume fermented grape juice that night. Then the firstborn daughter, that would be the eldest daughter, went in and lay with her father. He was unaware, lo yada, of her lying down or of her getting up. Even when initiated by a child, even when intoxicated, there is no excuse for pedophilia, for incest or rape. And that is what occurred. These are not the family values that Yahweh intended. The daughter raped her father. The daughters chose to engage in incest, and because of their relative age to their father, was pedophilia. It came to be the next day with the firstborn daughter saying to the younger sibling, "Behold, I had sexual relations by laying last night with my father. Let's get him to want to drink again some wine this night." then you can choose to go in and express your desire to lay and have sex with him, such that we can fulfill our desire to live through our Father's offspring. Bereshit 19:34. Who would have thought that the story told in the Torah would be so scandalous, right?
Graphic, yes.
Yeah, this needs a PG-13 rating.
No. This is real life.
Is real life, as we had suspected, or at least when it came to getting drunk. Lot was a willing participant. He may have been Abraham's nephew, but he did not have his uncle's character. Those adopted into Yahweh's covenant family live forever as a result of being accepted, having really accepted its conditions. But as mortals, those estranged from God, those who have chosen a popular or private path, live on only through their children. And unfortunately, not as a result of genetics, but instead of a result of social conditioning. There is very little that comes from dead men walking. This is telling of the entire human experience. It's, as you said, it's real. Each new civilization and nation repeats the mistakes of their predecessors. As is the case with a scratched record, where the phonograph replicates with annoying repetition that same irritating sound, Lot's daughters were prone to imitate one another's mistakes. Have I dated myself when I talk about a phonograph and a scratched record?
I understood it, though. I'm looking at a record player right now.
Yeah. Recognizing that anyone that's probably 20 or 30 years younger than us, my friend, wouldn't even know what a record player is, or what that experience was of having a scratched record and it making the same irritating sound over and over and over again.
So for the rest of you, just it goes over and over and over again, never goes any further. Yeah,
that's right. That's it. So, they once again caused their father to drink during the night. Then the younger sibling arose so as to lay with him, but he was unaware of her laying down or when she got up. Well, not impossible. What follows is highly improbable. The idea that two girls could have sex only once with an old man on back-to-back nights and both conceive strains credulity. So either we're not being told the entire story, or this became more routine. Or these women had their periods synced and Lot was firing bullets. I can't tell you which one. I can tell you that there's a reason we're being told this story.
Oh, yeah.
And we're figuring it out right now. But just on the logistics front, we're talking, you want a miraculous birth? Here's two miraculous births right here. Not in a good way.
No.
Thus, both of Lot's daughters became pregnant and gave birth through their father. 1936. The firstborn gave birth to a son, and she called his name Moab. Question and ponder the father, asking the who, what, where, why, and even when and how of this father. He is the father of Moab to this day and into perpetuity. Now, I think I'd shared with you, Kirk, that there's a lot of reasons that we're going back in time, because we had jumped way ahead and we had spent a whole series of shows on Yahowah 17. And we skipped right past, in the second volume, the review of Yahowah 15 and 16. And here we are, after we finished 17, going back and covering Yahowah 15 and 16, and yet here we are in this chapter. We haven't even gotten to Yahowah 15 and 16. All of this that we're going over was specifically to get to that line right there.
Yeah.
In Yahowah 15 and 16, the entire 2 chapters, as well as an entire chapter of Yahowah 48, as well as mentions through Ezekiel and elsewhere. Moab is predicted to be an entity representing something today that Yahowah is going to destroy.
Yes.
And as I wrote the Moab chapters of Yahowah 15 and 16, it became immediately obvious that Moab as a nation had been destroyed. Now, we're going to read that story because that story is riveting. We're going to read that story. But Moab had been destroyed 150 years before the prophecies in Yahowah 15 and 16 were written. So, therefore, God could not be talking about historic Moab, but something that Moab represents today. Now, if you're going to understand what Moab represents today, you've got to figure out, what was Moab like? Where did Moab come from? What is it about Moab that can be projected on a very substantial group of people today? And I'm going to tell you, this one line tells you a lot about them. Well,
I wrote in my notes, besides questionable father, I said, I wrote it as if I was talking to someone. I said, consider your father, your teacher, your guide, the one that you rely on, the one that you respect, and the one that you revere. Well, obviously, it's not Yahweh. So it's exactly what Moab is they've gone down the wrong path. They've gone down one of the multiple paths that are, and it's that's what Moab is you've chosen the wrong father.
Whether it's Akiba, who's the father of Rabbinic Judaism.
Yeah, Akiba.
Or it's Paul, who's the father of Christianity.
Yeah.
Or it's Muhammad, who's the father of Islam. And by the way, we're going to demonstrate conclusively that Paul was also the forefather of multicultural humanism. So there's a lot more than just Pauline Christianity.
Yeah,
this is question the nature of the father. The father here is Lot. And Lot impregnated his daughters in an act of incest. Drunken, stupid, where he was affected by the wrong spirit. Alcohol. And it says here he's the father of this questionable father, of those who should question their father, up to this day and into perpetuity. Ad hayom, forever and a day. Continuing and always for an unlimited duration of days. So when the kingdom of Moab was destroyed by the collective efforts of Yisrael and Yehudah, circa 950 BCE, it wasn't the end of Moab.
No.
Not of what this represents.
No, the disease goes on.
Right. Now, one step further. We didn't just read this because of this concluding line and this helping us understand the nature of Moab. Where did the girls in Lot, where were they polluted such that they thought that this was acceptable?
Well, of course, it's Sodom.
What is Yahweh going to say about the equivalency between Moab and Sodom?
They're synonymous.
They're synonymous. They're one and the same.
Of that place.
Right. So if you want to understand Moab today, you have to look at what Sodom was like. And that's the reason we studied we took a whole bunch of programs just to explain what was going on in Sodom and the mindset of Sodom, where they were, so full of their own opinions that they wanted to lambaste the Malak with their ideas, their words. And, Lot said, no, you're not speaking to him. And it was this gang gang mentality of Sodom, where that which is popular prevails. It's the nature of the sexual preferences that were on display. It was the nature of the multicultural idea. Who are you to judge us? You're not one of us. That's the thing every time that I talk about whom Muhammad was and how horrid Allah is. That
who are you?
Muslims say, you're not one of us. You have no right to judge us. Well, that's exactly what the Moabites said. It's exactly what the politically correct say today.
Absolutely. Secular, yeah.
Right. So we studied Sodom and the birth of Moab so that we'd understand what Moab represents today, because Yahweh spent 2 entire chapters of Yahshua explaining how he is going to eliminate them. So don't you want to know who they are? You know, and just in case you might happen to embrace one of those characteristics of the modern incarnation of Moab, wouldn't it be helpful to know who they are?
Understatement. Yes.
That's why we're doing this.
Yes.
The younger sibling, she also had her pregnancy culminate in the birth of a son, and she called his name Ben-Ami, son of my people, child of my family, offspring of my nation. He is the father of Ammon, of that which pertains to the nation, family, or people, up to this very day and into perpetuity, forever and a day, continuing and always for an unlimited duration of days. Ad is forever. And so it would be. Moab and Ammon would produce after their kind from generation to generation, from civilization to nation, over the course of 4,000 years, such that we see them among us today.
Well,
and that we should never forgo an opportunity to learn. Yalad, translated, had her pregnancy culminate in the birth of a son, is the same verb used to describe the young woman begetting Yosha earlier in Yahshua. When it's rendered virgin birth, no, it's Yalad. That the pregnancy will culminate in the birth of a child. It's an ordinary means to conception and childbirth. Albeit at this time, this twisted tale is about Lot representing Israel, at one moment inspiring the next inebriated, and yet all while protected by Yahweh as a result of his covenant promise. Sodom represents the fallen and fractured family of man, a people in place crippled by a compromised conscience and failure to exercise good judgment, poisoned by corruption and conspiracy, religion and politics, societal conditioning, and perverse values. And these things would live on via Moab. And with Amorah's authorization, Amorah, which we're going to learn that we want to identify Ben-Ami. Well, Ben-Ami, we're told, is Ammon, and Ammon is equated to Amorah. Just as Moab is equated to Sodom, Ammon from Ben-Ami is associated with Amorah. And Amorah means authoritarian manipulation, oppressive and tyrannical, binding and twisting, manifest through the long history of deplorable cultures and civilizations. The Amorah today are those 55 dictatorial tyrants of people and nations of Islam.
Now, you've described 3 aspects of this, what I consider a lot of the sameness, in that you've got Edom, or the Roman Catholic Church, and Ammon, the Islam, and of course political correctness, or the modern religion, and all of them are enslaving, and all of them are tyrannical, and all of them are binding, and all of them are in the antithesis of freedom. Why are you the only one? Us. But why is it that everybody doesn't see that? I mean, why? It's the same thing like they set him free. Yahweh says it all the time. He says, I took you out from Mizraim to set you free. why you want to be religious? Why do you want to be this way? And
why don't you go back and be enslaved? I set you free. I liberated you.
Problem there. I mean, no wonder things stand. And that brings us right back to Leon, where we started a long time ago.
Right. Yes.
Which is the same thing, isn't it? Is to tie up and bind and all the people in all the nations.
Yeah, people that are Cain system, who are prone to be led by some individual, whether it be Paul or Akiba or Muhammad or the fathers of political correctness and socialist secular humanism. They're just prone to be misled by, these arcane systems of old.
So you can have King Dode, or you can have the Prince of the Air, Satan.
Or it's the same battle that was being waged throughout 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, which is Words of Our Days, and 1st and 2nd Malach, leaders.
Yes.
The story there, the number one story there, is the battle between Shaul and Dode.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Yeah. And today, guess what the battle is? The number one battle from Yahweh's perspective, from Dode's perspective, from the perspective of the Mizmor and the prophets. Same battle between Dode and Shaul.
Yeah, same one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it?
Shaul, the father of Christianity, Paul. Same battle. The whole story of Shaul, the king, every aspect of it pertains directly to Paul. Every aspect of it. Most of all, what we have learned by carefully and thoroughly analyzing this story is that while the community's desire to promote its abnormal assessments on sexual orientation may have played a minor role, this hasn't been an expose on promiscuity or homosexuality. The problems plaguing Sodom were manifest in their words, their irrational notions which flowed out of their minds and hearts, not their genitals. Rather than being judged by God, they wanted to give Yah's messengers a piece of their mind. Sodom serves as a referendum between man's beliefs and Yahweh's message. Now, there is, of course, a lot more to the story of Moab. Hostilities were further enraged when the Moabite king Balak hired Balaam to curse Israel. Now, that sordid tale is told in the same book, Bar Midbar, the same book as in the Torah, Bar Midbar, Numbers 22 through 24. It's not unlike Satan having his messenger, Shaul Paul, do the same thing in the Lord's name throughout the Christian New Testament. This contest between Satan's religious devotees and those estranged or engaged in a relationship with Yahweh is a reoccurring theme in defining Moab. Problems arose again during the Exodus when Moabite women used sex to lead the Israelite men into worshiping their Lord, foreshadowing Christianity. The scene is described in Bamidbar, Numbers 25, 1 through 3. And while this may be one of the reasons that Yahweh gave his people over to being consistently controlled by women toward the conclusion of their long estrangement. Remember, we spent an entire program trying to, what does it mean by turning women over, men to be control of women? The feminization of Israel. God would immediately hold Moab accountable for promoting their religion, making an example of them few would dare misconstrue. In this account, we find more than enough angst to make an ongoing example of those who would pick up the mantle of Moab. Let's share a little bit of what God had to say here. This is what the Torah reveals.
25.
While Israel camped out and remained in Shittim. Can't make this stuff up.
No.
I don't know. Can you say that on the radio? I think you can, right? If God wrote it, you can say it. Well, while Israel camped out and remained in Shittim, which, by the way, means the plague, meaning to pierce, scourge, blight, and menace, the people began defiling themselves. That's what happens when you camp out in Shittim. They started fatally wounding themselves, profaning, dishonoring, and desecrating themselves, essentially killing themselves by exposing themselves to a pandemic disease, by engaging in adulterous and unfaithful prostitution among the daughters of Moab. Well, this episode opens with a reference to prostitution and harlotry, as we will soon see. But in actuality, it's about the adulterous nature of religion rather than anything sexual. And while there is an undercurrent of lust rather than love, and thus of a different kind of sexual orientation than the covenant prescribes, one similar to the liberal culture of mankind today, God is far more interested in what we think than what we do. When the people approached, they were invited, la kara, summoned, drawing near, to sacrifices to their gods. Then the people ate them, making pronouncements while worshiping, some even bowing down, prostrating themselves in homage to their gods. As a result, Israel joined in by worshiping and became yoked to Baal Peor, Lord of the broad and open way. Now I'm going to pause here just a second. I goofed. Wasn't the first time, won't be the last. I had looked at Peor, and I had looked at the silent letter and the OWR pronunciation. And it's exactly how or is written, except the silent letter is part of the pa, not the or, and the O of the OWR is the O sound is from the wa. It's not written as the Lord of Light. Or is the Hebrew word for light. This isn't written the same way. But you just look at the transliteration, and that's exactly where you're going to go, right? I went there. But that's not what Peor means. Baal Peor is the owner and master of the mountain of Moab, where a false god was worshipped as the Lord of the expansive and inclusive environment. It's from Baal, Lord, master, and owner, the one who possesses and controls, and Peor, from Pa'ar, that which is associated with the wide and open way. I didn't catch it initially, but
I got you.
in what's called the Sermon on the Mount, when Yosha proved that he was right about the Torah, he spoke very eloquently about the broad and open way and how it leads to death and destruction of one's soul. The broad and open way is the way of man. It's political man, military man, conspiratorial man, religious man. That's the God of the broad and open way. That's the religion of the broad and open way. And so this was the Lord of the broad and open way. It's the way that is popular within societies, the way to which the society opens its doors. It's the broadest appeal within society. And throughout history, that which has been most popular has been wrong, just as it is today. Sure. It's a very narrow way that very few find that leads to life. The broad and popular way leads to death. If you are an adherent to a political system, a patriotic system, or a religion that is popular, then you are part of the broad and popular way, the broad and open way. You have to reject that which is popular and broadly accepted, and accept that which is incredibly unpopular and very seldom accepted if you're going to be with God. So as a result, Israel joined in by worshiping and became yoked to Baal Peor, the Lord of the broad and open way. And so the overwhelming resentment and frustration of Yahweh was kindled and set ablaze, revealing his concern with Israel. It may be popular, but God hates it.
Yeah.
Everybody may be open to it, but God despises it. If you want to have God despise you, embrace that which man loves. If you want to have God love you, reject the way of man. That's what's being said here.
Mm-hmm.
So the people approached, they were invited to the sacrifices to their gods. Then the people ate them, making pronouncements while worshiping, some even bowing down, prostrating themselves in homage to their gods. As a result, Yisrael joined in by worshiping and became yoked to Baal Peor, the Lord of the broad and open way. And so the overwhelming resentment and frustration of Yahweh was kindled and set ablaze, revealing his concern with Yisrael. Bamidbar, Numbers 25, 1, 2, and 3. This is Torah, and thus Yahweh is teaching those willing to listen that he isn't just unimpressed by religion and intolerant of it, but that those who worship the Lord actually antagonize him. And I just want to tell people all the time, you're going to church, why would you want to antagonize God? When you call on the Lord, why do you want to piss him off? What do you got against God? You want to irritate him this way. Carrying your dead God around on a stick. What, do you want to gloat that man killed your God? What's wrong with you? But almost, billions of souls today are seduced by this, and it ought to be sobering. And that almost everyone has been seduced into believing something to such a degree that they join in participating in something that antagonizes God through their sexual orientation, their sacrifices, their religious veneration, their public pronouncements, or their propensity to participate in conspiracies as foolish as those advanced by the Moabite women. If you refer to your God as the Lord, if you adhere to a religion whereby the way to God is popular and accommodating, and thus open in acceptance and broad in its appeal, you may want to reevaluate your faith. Rather than pleasing God, religions such as Christianity anger him. Baal Peor, the Lord of the broad and open way, is eerily similar to the Christian caricature of the Lord Jesus Christ. And his troubadours are one of today's incarcerations or incarnations of Moab, the appalling Christians. Be aware, just as was the case 3,450 years ago, Yahweh's overwhelming resentment and frustration remains kindled against those who follow and promote the Lord of the broad and open way, the Lord of the popular religions. More than this, it would be similarly reasonable to identify the multicultural, politically correct, and broadly defined sexual advocacy of the populace promoting socialist secular humanism with Moab, at least based upon this episode. Their dedication to seducing the masses such that they are lured in, willing to accept their views on sexual orientation, their insistence that everyone make sacrifices to save their planet, and that they alter their diet and modify their pronouncements such that they are deemed politically correct, are all mantras that are foreshadows by ancient Moab, as they attempted to influence and manipulate the masses so they were controlled by their agenda. Now, as will be the case in our future, as was the case in our past, Yah chose to make an example of those who worship the Lord of the broad and open way, and of those who promoted abnormal sexual orientations as a source of pride, holding the advocates of the Moabite and now Christian and humanist religions responsible for what they have done and will do to harm his children. God devised an unforgettable way to make his point, while demonstrating the magnitude of the offense, which is nothing more or less than being lured in by a twisted approach to sexuality and either capitulating by way of political correct pronouncements or worshiping the Lord as if he were God. So then Yahweh said to Moshe, the one who draws out, choose of your own volition to take, therefore, all of the leaders or all of the heads, depending on how you want to define Rosh, the choicest things, the rulers and or the heads of the people, and disassociate from them or dislocate them and turn them, twisting them such that they are alienated in disgust, even possibly turned away and put to death, severed and exposed, abandoned to rot, separating them according to Yahweh, and do so conspicuously, so as to make known and inform by facing them before Neged publicly in a position directly in front of and as a counterpart to the sun, such that the burning anger of Yahweh may be turned away from Israel. Now you can interpret this any way you like. Cut off their heads and face them directly into the sun so that the anger of Yahweh might dissipate over this. He wants to hold the perpetrators accountable. Now, it's interesting that Yahweh went after the men.
Yeah.
The women that lured them. But it's the men who are always the leaders of these sexual cults and these religious cults. Sever their heads or disassociate from them, from the leaders. Turn them or dislocate them according to Yahweh. Do so conspicuously, so as to inform by facing them before the sun, such that the burning anger of Yahweh may be turned away from Israel. When you promote the things of modern Moab, political correctness, socialist secular humanism, multiculturalism, Pauline Christianity, God is going to treat you exactly as he instructed Moshe to treat those who had done it before. I don't think that no matter how you want to look at this, whether they were decapitated or that they were made an example of, it's bad. This is not something you should want. It's something you should do everything you can to avoid. Now, there is nothing more lethal than mankind's most popular and acclaimed broad-based appeals, social customs, religious beliefs, or political agendas. They plague every soul they touch, keeping them in shittim. Therefore, Yahweh wisely asked the Israelites to disassociate from those who had already condemned themselves as a result of this conspiracy against God that they were advocating further. Since religion, like conspiracy and politics, thrives in the minds of men and women, and since most are replete with solar imagery and claims of enlightenment, the heads of the leaders of the Moabite men, in league with their Lord of the open and broad way, were positioned facing their God, the sun. Really, in every ancient culture, the sun was always the father of the gods, the most important God. The Lord was always manifest by the sun. And you might think, well, in Christianity, we don't do that. We're not pagan like the rest of them. Well, why do you have halos above your God's head? Yeah. If that's the case, why do you have steeples that catch the first and last light of the day, like the old obelisks of old? If that's the case, why do you have the same Trinity? Why, if that's the case, do you celebrate the two most important holidays on the pagan calendar? Easter, named after Astarte, the Queen of Heaven, Mother of God, and 9 months later, the birth of the Son of the Sun on Christmas. Why? Why do you call your God the Lord right after the same name of the pagan sun god of old? Why do you name the book that you tout around a Bible after Babel, from Babylon? If you're different, why have you incorporated everything that they believed, including worshiping your God on Sundays, bowing down to him? Why? Nothing's changed under the sun. They were positioned facing their God, the sun. The sun, Imperial Rome became the Roman Catholic Church. What was the religion of Imperial Rome from the time of the Caesars and their legions up to the point of Theodosius? What was the name? The name of the chief god was also the name of the religion. You know what it was, Kirk?
No, I'm going blank all of a sudden. It's
Mithraism.
Oh, Mithra, yeah.
Mithras was the unconquerable sun. When Constantine, alleged to have that sun, that sign in front of his in front of the sun, at the end of the sign conquer. That's Mithra and Mithraism. They put Mithra's symbols on their shields. They weren't converting to Christianity. They were acknowledging Mithraism. Mithras was the god of the legions. Mithras was the god of the Caesars. Mithras the sun. That's the reality of it all. The religion of Roman Catholicism grew out of Mithraism. They're one and the same. So, this is God's position on it, and it's what we should never forget. Religion is deadly. Those executing good judgment based upon evidence and reason will always see it as such, and will avoid the deadly plague of this Lord of the broad and open way. Therefore Moshe cried out and said to the judges, those who execute good judgment of Yisrael, the choice is yours to intentionally end the life of every individual who associate with, involving themselves by joining in and worshiping through shared and popular beliefs to approach Baal Peor, the Lord of the broad and open way. So, consider this the Torah's teaching on the subject of Moab. Yahweh wants everyone to understand and never forget Moab is twisted and seductive, causing people to make sacrifices to fit in. They indoctrinate their culture and seek to influence surrounding societies through enticing pronouncements, popularizing all manner of myths while redefining what is correct and appropriate. In this way, the appeal of Moab is indistinguishable from the popular way of multiculturalism, political correctness, social or secular humanism. And yet through Moab, Yahweh is also indicting Pauline Christianity, the Lord's religion, the faith of the broad and popular way, which leads to the death and destruction of us all. This means that today's Moabites are the modern embodiment of Babylon. They babble, mixing together secular and sectarian notions, interweaving strands of truth into their tapestry of lies. This is not only found in political correctness, which is the replacement moral code of multicultural socialist secular humanism, but overwhelmingly so in the 14th twisted epistles of Shaul, question him, the highly questionable father of Christianity. It was this very idea, after all, that Yosha rebuked during his instructions on the mountain, Matthew 5-7, as the broad and open way to death and destruction. that was in conflict with his Torah instructions. And Kirk, my friend, we are just beginning.
Yeah.
There is a lot more that we're going to learn about Moab and about Yisrael and Yahudah's interaction with Moab. In fact, I would say that Yisrael and Yahudah's desire to destroy Moab for ceasing tribute payments, going after them strictly on a basis of greed, and the Moabite response, and what Yahweh said about the Israelites fulfilling their desire, and the conspiracy that Israel would bring to bear on this day, is one of the least understood and most fascinating stories in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms.
Yeah, it's pretty sick one too. I mean, gosh.
It is really sickening.
Yeah.
When we read this story, what we find is that everything that Yisrael would do to Moab, they would bring upon themselves. And what they did to Moab was despicable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was once accused of being an anti-Semite because I correctly revealed that had it not been for the rabbis in Yathrib selling twisted Talmud stories to Muhammad so that he could make his Quran seem somewhat credible, that Islam would not exist today. It would have died there in Yathrib 1,400 years ago. And a very popular author of books on Islam went on the warpath and accused me of being an anti-Semite, that I was, blaming Jews for the hatred of Muslims. Well, what I was saying is the truth.
Yeah, just the facts.
Jews chose their Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, over the Torah, sold Muhammad stories from it. Muhammad used those stories to flesh out his Quran so that it had more in it than just the poetry of the Hanifs, the pagans in Yemen.
Yeah.
And then when the rabbis laughed at him and mocked him and charged him for those stories and laughed at him for twisting them to suit his agenda, Muhammad didn't have the money to pay them, and he had thin skin, didn't like being mocked. So his solution was wipe them out to the last, kill them all. They brought it on themselves. And that's the story of we're going to review next, which is the Israelite decision to go after Moab for failure to continue paying tribute. It's one of the saddest I think I've ever read.
Yeah, it was pretty rough to read.
Yeah.
I agree.
Now, and we're going to go through this because it's important for us to really understand Moab, because there's a lot of prophecies about them. And when we come out of the other end, we're going to understand our world and what Yahweh likes and dislikes, and what's going to happen in our immediate future much better than we do now. So there's a reason for doing this, but as we spent a lot of the first part of this program hitting at, Kirk, once we turn the page and we go to the first 7 Mizmor, and then the prophetic statements that help explain and affirm what we're reading, it's just as this is somewhat depressing. This is some of the worst of humanity. This is describing our world today. We're going to experience some of the most uplifting and positive and nurturing and enlightening and affirming messages thus far.
Well, after this week, it was even hard to go back to Lot.
Yes, it was.
I mean, today I reviewed it today because I knew we were going to go back to it, but I'm going, oh man, this is a bummer compared to where we were.
I know. Yeah, I was as I was preparing for the show, and I spent what I decided to do. I spent until the moment that I picked up the phone to call in, translating the Mizmor 18 that I shared with you before the show began. You know, it's I can't leave it.
Okay.
And I brought up the material on Lot because I knew that's where we needed to pick back up, and we don't do it now. We're never going to do it because once you start down this path of the Mizmor, you ain't coming back. Yeah, you aren't coming back. It's just not coming back.
Enough already. It's so horrible stuff.
Enough. But it isn't enough. Yahweh, like Dode, has more to say about what's wrong than what's right. And the reason is that the overwhelming preponderance of people are wrong. Until they reject what is wrong and disassociate from it, there's no way for them to know what's right. And so if you don't spend a lot of time exposing and condemning what's wrong, there's no hope of anybody appreciating what's right. And that's the message that we have to convey through Moab. This is what's wrong.
Yeah.
Because if we can get people, whether they be socialist, secular humanists, multiculturalists, Pauline Christians, to question how they have been misled, then there is hope for them following where the words lead and becoming aware of what's true. It's just got to be done in the right order.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, great stuff.
Yes. I was really excited. I mean, I don't think I can recall being as excited as I was translating the story of Sodom and Lot, and then the story that reveals how Yisrael brought on itself everything that it sought to do to Moab, and what Moab and Ammon represent today as reflected in Sodom and Gomorrah. And then making sense of exactly what was being destroyed in the last days with all the prophetic references to Moab and Yeshaya 15 and 16. That was very exciting stuff.
Yeah.
And boy, I thought that it just can't get any better than this.
Yeah,
and then Volume 3 happened.
Yeah.
And it was like we've talked about this before, that we're in 3.5 dimensions, stuck in the ordinary flow of time in a 3-dimensional world. And yet the universe is 6 dimensions, and Yahweh exists in the 7th. Yeah. And that it's actually an infinite change, an infinite increase, to go from 3.5 to 4 dimensions, and infinite again to go from 4 to 5, and infinite again to go from 5 to 6, and infinite again to go from 6 to 7. I felt like the transition from this, which is really profoundly insightful, to the first 7 Mizmor and the corroborating material was infinitely more enriching and enlightening.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. It was elevating is an understatement, but it was just profound stuff. I mean, like I told you, I was going to write you a note. Say, it's been. I've only got 4 pages, and I've only had 3 magnificent insights. What happened? What happened? The note I'm going. Oh wow, man! Take a deep breath here. You know.
Yeah. But we will return to this because it's important, and it was told to us in the Torah for a reason.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
It's important that we rely on it, and part of what we're about to go to too is it's going to explain why Israel brought all this horrible stuff on itself. It's going to explain how it brought the conspiracy on itself. You know, how it brought the Holocaust on itself. How it brought the Islamic onslaught upon itself.
Well, that should tell
God
people.
can explain that.
Yeah, that should, if nothing else, this is the big warning for Jerusalem and the United States. Get out,
yes,
or get in with the program. I mean, go back to the Torah, and then avoid all of it. Just go out with the rule. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So this is why you're led this way. Great stuff.
Exactly. All right, my friend. It's been fun. We'll mush our way through this. I don't know quite where we are. I think we're on page 46.
46.
Now the two chapters combined for on Moab are about 150 pages long. So.
Yeah, let me see. I go to about 133. So there's more than that, huh? Okay.
Well, I think it's it's two different. I broke it into two chapters, part 1 and part 2. And I really don't know the total number of pages between them, but it's over 130
we got 90 more
for
to
sure.
go at least.
Yeah, it's more. But I don't think any of it's boring. I think all of it's extremely interesting. It's informative. It's foundational.
Yes.
It really helps to establish what was and what will be.
Mm-hmm.
Helps us gain perspective, understanding. And, Moab was a nation that Dowd was very familiar with, both pro and con.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things, too, is that, Dowd's grandmother, Ruth, either grandmother, great-grandmother, whichever one it was, Ruth, was a Moabite.
Mm-hmm. Walked away, but yes.
Yeah. And someone might say, wait a minute, but how can, the pure, the most purest fundamentalist root of Yahudah have a great-grandmother that was a Moabite? Well, I would ask you this. Who was Lot?
He was Abraham's son. Abraham's nephew.
Nephew, that is correct.
They all came out of Babylon.
And so when Lot had fathered two children, one of them being Moab, through his daughters, how were they ethnically different than Abraham and Sarah?
Same bloodline.
Same ethnicity, right?
Mm-hmm, that's right.
So what made Moab unique was not their DNA differences. It was not their ethnicity, the same ethnicity.
No.
Same language.
Mm-hmm.
Both spoke Hebrew, both wrote Hebrew. It was the culture. It was the religion and the culture.
Here's a warning.
Otherwise, from an ethnicity point of view, it's the same people.
Yeah. Well, that's a warning to Yehuda.
Yes.
Your ethnicity ain't gonna save you.
Yeah. And by the way, Ruth, she was a Moabite by birth, which means same ethnicity as, of course, Yisrael. But she walked away from Moab, and she pronounced your people to the Israelite, who had led her to Israel. So your people are my people.
Yeah.
Your land is my land. Your God is my God.
Very profound. Very important speech. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So Ruth became an example of what it's like to walk away from a culture and embrace Israel and the Torah and Yahweh. And she's really a stand-up woman.
Mm-hmm. Well, the beauty of what you do is your mind is so keen and quick. You make these connections all the time. They're there, but it is certainly helpful that you're able to do that, and then we get to glean everything else. It's just
everybody's got their strengths and weaknesses, and that's the beauty of this whole thing. Is that if you look at Dowd and Moshe, who are easily the two most important people in human history. That both of them were flawed rascals. So we can be fallen rascals, we all bring something that's unique to the party, and that what Yahweh is looking for is in eternity for us to bring whatever is unique and positive about our personality and character and attributes to the covenant family, while he obliterates and covers over everything that is less desirable. Yeah, but yes, I have a unique skill set, as do you. And Yahweh is encouraging us to use the attributes that we have, to study His Word, and mine just happens to be something that really works for what we're doing here, which is I'm slow at it, but with the will and desire to translate His Word and to view it from the proper perspective so as to make the right connections, and from those connections to help understand and then share so that many of us can come to understand.
Well, I'll give you one teaser before you go.
Yes, please.
In the ancient Hebrew letters, the pictogram.
Yes.
There's one that I've talked about. We talked about it years ago. The Gon, the little one that looks like a figure 8 with some little tails coming, which is really a rope, a crooked rope. And it always bothered me, and I said, but I walked away from it because in those 22 word analysis with the eight things in each word.
Right. Each of the 22 letters.
He doesn't. Obviously, he doesn't use again. So I said, well, then it doesn't matter. So I did some research on it just because it bothered me, because I was in relation to all this. I don't know, for some reason.
It's always been a curiosity to me too. It was obviously one of the letters, and then one of the letters, like either there's two T's and there's two S's, that one of the two T's and one of the two S's was added, and the Gon was subtracted. So I always wonder, when did that happen? Why did that happen?
Well, they say here's what I've found. They say that the Gon was incorporated into the Ain, and all right, fine. It was around in ancient times, Hebrew times, when some Hebrew stuff, but not. It was abandoned rather quickly, I think. It stuck with all the other Semitic languages, and nowadays it's still very much in the Arabic. So I said, well, what is it? Let's just look up the Gan words. There ain't that many of them. And I looked up every one of them. There's 26 that I found. Every one of them describes Moab.
Really?
It's crooked. Here's the meanings for all the 26 words that I could find that start with Gan. It's crooked, barren, dead stump or a dead tree. It means perverse. Another word means crooked place. Dark like a raven. Dark covering. Desert wilderness. Subtle, crafty. It means to beware. It also means it was associated with the word arom, which is A-R-O-M, a tree. To be, and I looked up that, and it was, hang on, I'll pass on that for a moment. To be shrewd, to be crafty, dark clouds. It also means to be made naked like slaves. I added the slavery part because they always enslaved people and made them naked. To be imprudent, to be spiteful, to use incense and prayer. Everything that we say that's twisted is incorporated in the Gan word, and the only people that seem to still like it are the enemies of Yisrael.
Like, for example, Goy and Goyim. It's a Gan word.
Yeah.
And the word that we translate Amorah as Gomorrah is because Gomorrah was a Gan word and was morphed into the Amorah, but it was originally a Gan word. It was Gomorrah.
So everything I did on this one was negative. I never found such a group of words that were just totally negative. And it all means to bind and to enslave and to be deceitful and to be crooked. It is a twisted rope. It is a twisted rope. Word at the moment, but there's an ancient there's a word in Hebrew where you talk about a straight rope that's tied tight.
Right.
Joined.
Yeah, that's what's interesting is the gon was because there is about the fifth or sixth variation of the Hebrew alphabet happens to be what we call today Arabic letters. The Arabic letters really aren't Arabic letters; they're Hebrew letters, and every Hebrew letter 1 through 9, the numerals 1 through 9, are all depicted in these Hebrew letters, and the gon is exactly an 8.
Well, that's probably where we get the 8 looking at it, for eternity.
Oh, yeah, it is the 8. It was replaced as the gon was taken out of the language. It was like the letters of the language were set apart from the ugliness of the gon. And the gon doesn't represent 8 in terms of infinity, but it is Ben who has used the Hebrew depiction of the numeral 8 to turn it on its side and create the symbol for infinity. So the gon, which is an upright numeral 8 in its depiction, was turned on its side to become man's symbol of eternity. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. All of it. It's just fun.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. There's so much of Hebrew that's hard for us to know, and that actually is not my biggest frustration. Is not what happened to the Gan, and I know it got morphed into the Ain, but then to keep the alphabet at 22 letters, they either replicated the Shemach and Sin, not the SH, because there's the Sin and the Shin, which are the SH sound and the S sound, but there's the Shemach is also an S sound, so there's 2 S's and there's 2 T's, the Ta and the Teth. And so one of those was replicated to keep the alphabet at 22 letters. That's not the thing that's not my biggest frustration. My actually biggest frustration is, you might think is just silly, but timekeeping and knowing the precise times of things, the way numbers were conveyed in the evolving nature of Hebrew and with these manuscripts and then interpreted. Time is the tough one. Mm-hmm. It's really tough to nail down the time of all of these events, and so that's the hard part. I mean, there's been calendar changes. We are now using the Roman Catholic calendar. The Roman Catholic calendar changed to the Gregorian after the Pope Gregory, when their Easter was falling later and later in the year because out of sync with the season, because they didn't have a leap year in it, and so the Gregorian then replaced the Julian calendar, which was named after Julius Caesar, was Roman. Yes. And Yahweh doesn't use the Julian or the Gregorian calendar, I'll tell you that for sure. So trying to juxtapose Yahweh's dates on this pagan Roman Catholic means of correlating time, that's hard. Yeah. And well, so it's pretty obvious that these things occurred in year 1000. That'd be the flood, 1000 the expulsion from Eden, year 0 the flood, year 1000 the dress rehearsal for Pesach with the affirmation of the covenant on Moriah with Abraham and Yishak, 2000 Dode, and the ultimate foundation of the temple being laid is 3000 Dode sits right in the heart of time. Yes. He's right in the center of time. And then that's 3000 which is 1000 or 968 BCE. And then 1000 years from that is 33 CE when Yosha fulfilled Pesach.
therefore.
And 1,000 years from that is when all the Christian pilgrims came to Jerusalem, but the water was poisoned, and an affirmation of one of the things that the Torah predicted. But the 1,000 increments are really, and that particular one's essentially unimportant. It was 2,000 years, 40 Yobel, from Yosha's fulfillment to Yahweh's return. And that's, if we're correlating Yah's calendar correctly with these pagan calendars, that would occur in 2033. But my angst is always Yahweh's calendar prevails, and trying to juxtapose his calendar on man's.
But if you have 2,000 year increments, then you have those pretty solid at some point, and then you have every 50-year Yobel years, then you should be able to extrapolate and get there within a year or two at the worst. When you think.
You should, but it's, again, because of the shift from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, determining with absolute certainty that the fulfillment of Pesach was in 30 CE, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, somewhere in that range. As I study it and look at the moon phases and the days of the week as the eyewitness accounts report, and you do the math from the decree of Artaxerxes as presented in Daniel, you come to Pesach in 33 CE, and that's where the math leads.
Yeah, I've actually done that. It's been, well, I didn't do it. I observed it, read it, and so forth, and it seems to come right down to the day you can walk in through the gate.
It's 4 days before Pesach, when the Pesach lamb would come in from Bethlehem into the city, is the date that it comes to, and 33 CE. And so you say, all right, well, that's and exactly 20 Yobel previously in 968 BCE, which would be 1,000 years because there was no year zero. That is when virtually every historian and scholar confirms that this speech by Solomon would have occurred with the dedication of Yahweh's temple.
Mm-hmm.
And it can't be precise. It's obvious that it would be 40 Yobel because it was right around 968 BCE. If you take everything we know about Abraham and the timing that it's revealed, so that would have been year 2000, 960 or in 1968 BCE, and the flood was 1,000 years before that. But I'm still to say with certainty that we have correctly correlated Yahweh's calendar on a timepiece that God finds revolting. That's uncomfortable.
I see your point, but
that's uncomfortable.
Is there a factor that tells you when the Apophis hits? I mean, that they cannot hit.
Yeah, that's it does according to scientists, it does the flyby that's a razor burn inside, not just inside of where the moon orbits, inside of our satellite.
That's what I heard.
On the 13th of April 2029, which is the exact midpoint of the time of Jacob's troubles.
Yeah.
And the exact day of the midpoint. That's an interesting information. Yeah. But again, I'm hugely in favor of not being authoritarian. That's the right word. Not being so set in one's conclusions that you lay them down and say, well, this is it. I'd much rather say that there are things that we can validate for certain, and I never want to be a person held accountable for correctly juxtaposing Yahweh's calendar on man's.
Well, I'll tell you one thing.
That's my point.
tell you one thing. If you see Damascus fall, I know exactly where we are.
Yeah,
I don't
we know where we are.
Stay long. I don't know how.
Yeah, and of course it's a third gone right now.
Yeah.
It is the third gone. If you look at the pictures of all the suburbs of Damascus, in fact, in one of those chapters, I actually did an analysis. I think we've shared it on this program, of an analysis of all the suburbs and all of the regions of Damascus that were already trashed and beyond repair, twisted heaps of ruins. You know, and of course the decree that will thin Israel again, because you know that under Netanyahu, and whether or not he survives the indictment against him and wins prevails again in an election. And of course, Israel has a parliamentary system, so it's I think it's the worst form of government, because it forces people to use bribes to get small parties to go along with them, and that was the whole deal that a secular Netanyahu's is fairly orthodox in his religiosity, and he is prime minister of Israel because he has been able to build a coalition between the nutcase fundamentalist religious Jews, the worst of Israel, which is a significant part of his base. Of course, his main base is the Likud party, which is just a conservative political party. But without the backing of the super Orthodox religion, he would never have been prime minister, would not have won a single election. And the things that he has to give up to get them into his coalition are revolting. And this time, the 5 votes that kept him from forming a majority were actually of the fully secular but Israel First party. Only had 5 seats in the Knesset, but and he had always sided with and used to be part of Netanyahu's cabinet, very close ally of Netanyahu. But this time he said, you know, unless you are going to finally change your position relative to the Orthodox, the super Orthodox religious Jews, so that they're treated like every other Israeli. They have to serve in the armed forces, to defend the country, pay taxes like everybody else, and unless you're willing to at least move in that direction, I'm not going to side with you this time. And that's what happened. That's why there's a new election. Israel's a pretty screwed up place, politically, religiously. You know, and what we do here on this program is illegal in Israel.
Oh, I know. It puts you in jail.
Yeah.
Put me in jail. Well.
Yeah, they would.
Yeah.
It'd put us both in jail.
Mm-hmm.
For doing the right thing. For speaking on behalf of the Creator of the universe. If I can put in jail, that's a good thing to put in jail for. But fortunately for us, as we have learned, the message that is Yahweh is lifting up and using to call his people home, comes from a faraway place in a different language. And of course, it's really interesting to know that the language spoken by more Jews, more Yehudim than any other, isn't Hebrew.
No.
It's English. So, you know, it's appropriate that we're conveying the message in this language. It's the number one language spoken by Jews the world over. It's English.
I got a call from Hindro, and he said, "Is it a single person or one person?" I said, "No, it's a single person. It's a."
Oh, the Nakri or the Choder.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Nakri is a single individual.
One of the translations, I looked at the 26 translations and that I have in the book, and whether the translation is singular or plural is irrelevant. What's relevant is the noun is singular. Yes.
And then there's prophecy in Yeshaya, and Mizmor 18.
Yes, sir.
It's also singular. Now, there are plural people that benefit from the message, but the foreigner is this observant foreigner who's discerning is singular there too.
Well,
so it's singular.
Okay. Well, if you come up
but
with
a singular person can have considerable influence on lots of other people, like Dode did. Dode's a singular guy, but look at the influence he had on the lives of others. And some of the others did marvelous and extraordinary things.
Sure.
Like, he's the forefather of Yosha. And Solomon, where I'm not a fan of Solomon in the later years, I don't think Yahweh is either, but Solomon started off really well.
Very. He has a great name. I mean, the letters are just really good. Anyway. Listen, if you have more wonderful insights and you just can't stand it, shoot me a line.
Okay, I will send you. I'm actually going to take off for 2 or 3 days, so I may not be able to get a lot done in the next 2 or 3 days. But I will gladly send this to you say on Monday, or I may even send you where I am on the chapter now, because I've made a lot of progress on it even since the last version of it that I sent to you on chapter 2 of volume 3.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
So we'll do that. All right, my friend.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Good night.
Good night. Yeah.